There was an MS-13 gang member that was caught traveling with the migrant caravan.
The health situation is dire as the migrants continue to overwhelm our southern border.
Whether it needs to be Mexico, whether they need to go back home to their home countries, but someone does need to care for these people.
President Trump will head to Argentina for the annual G20 summit. He's expected to meet with several world leaders, including Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Former Secretary of State John Kerry hinting that he could make a 2020 run for president.
I'm not taking anything off the table. Yeah, I'm going to think about it.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. The President and First Lady taking part in the 96th annual National Christmas Tree Lighting.
May this Christmas season bring peace to your hearts, cheer to your spirit, and joy to the world.
I've been hanging around
Last week, and they have this tree farm. It's been in this family.
When you're in the
for
tree
3
farm
generations.
business, that's the Super Bowl.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right.
Beautiful
And we'll see you
tree
tomorrow.
in the Blue Room.
All right. In the meantime.
In the meantime, straight to this. It's a Fox News alert. Border agents arresting an MS-13 gang member traveling with the migrant caravan.
This, as Fox News exclusively learns of some health risks some of those migrants are exhibiting in Tijuana.
Griff Jenkins is live in Tijuana with the latest. Griff.
Guys, his name is Jose Villalobos Jobel. He's a 29-year-old Honduran, and he was traveling with a 2000 caravan that ended up in Mexicali. He was apprehended by Border Patrol just across in the Calexico port of entry, and Villalobos confirming to Customs and Border Protection that he is indeed a member of the very lethal MS-13 gang. But as you mentioned, not the only risk posed to Americans. The health issue is a big one. This caravan is very sick. Take a look at these numbers. Of the 2,267 migrants that were treated, we know that over 60% have respiratory infections. We know that there are 3 confirmed cases of tuberculosis, 4 cases of HIV/AIDS, 101 cases of lice, and 4 cases of chicken pox. But it is this overcrowding situation that is really making it difficult. This is a space for 1,000 people, and you've got over 6,000 crammed in there. There's constant coughing and spitting. And, I want to show you just a little bit on that overcrowding. Beyond me is the actual major tent city. You see people that couldn't get in there overcrowded here. And I want to just show you this quick image. It's very difficult. It's raining. It's cold. It's wet with an already sick population. And there's 4 or 5 people sleeping underneath this truck. That's the best they can get. There's some reports of possibly moving this population to another location where they could have some shelter and more space. We'll find out if that happens later today. And it comes also amid reports with all of these problems. President Trump may be considering extending troop deployments along the border into January. Currently, we've got 5,900 active duty troops supporting CBP, along with 2,100 National Guard. Situation is very fluid. This population is very sick, guys.
Hey, Griff, I keep hearing about them possibly begin to self-deport as the stadium becomes intolerable and it becomes clear that rushing the border last weekend was not a good move. Some people leaving. Have you seen people leaving?
I've seen 80 people deport 2 days ago, maybe a handful self-deporting yesterday, and of course the Mexican officials deported 98 after that Sunday situation where they rushed the border. But, by and large, this population, when you talk to the migrants, believed that they were going to have a much easier time. Now they're finally coming to the realization that they're not going to get in. Most of them will not apply or qualify for asylum, and so the situation is really going to reach, as one migrant told me, perhaps a breaking point where they either just turn around and go home or they rush the border again.
Well, Griff, I read in one of the papers in that town this morning that apparently the migrants are being offered 2 options. 1, apply for refugee status, or 2, apply for a 1-year visa. But to get the visa, you got to prove that you're looking for work. And that's why yesterday, apparently, they had a job fair near where you are, and hundreds lined up looking for jobs in Mexico.
We did see, Steve, people with forms yesterday here inside the tent city with work applications, and the Mexican government is offering temporary employment and temporary asylum. The problem is the migrants didn't want that. They wanted to get to the United States, and really the officials here in Tijuana have a situation with an incoming new Mexican president. They're not entirely sure whether that administration is offering a longer-term deal, because to keep these migrants at a long time, for 4 months, 6 months, even longer, waiting to try and apply for asylum in this city is going to absolutely devastate their resources here, because it's costing them $30,000 to $40,000 a day, and they can't sustain it, and they have no federal funding, whether it's health or resources like tents and tarps and places to stay. So that's really the dynamic of the major problem they've got here in Tijuana.
Hey, Griff, several things stick out. I want to know more information about this MS-13 guy that was arrested. I want you to tell us more information on that if you have it. And also, I think it was from one of your reports, I saw a guy say that they've lied to us. We started down in Central America. We came up. We feel like we've been lied to. Can you elaborate on that, too?
Well, yeah, let me elaborate on the lying first. I've talked to a handful of migrants, one guy in particular, Marco Munoz, who's from Honduras. He's got a pretty credible claim for asylum because his daughter was forced to carry drugs, and he was then shot by a cartel. But he says when he talked to organizers in both Honduras as well as in southern Mexico, they were telling him all along, you're going to get there, it's going to be easy, they're going to get you a number, you'll quickly get across. Well, that's not the case, and so that is the source. The root of the frustration is that many of these migrants truly believed that when they got to this point in Tijuana, it was going to be easy and fast, and it's been anything but not. But as we also have seen from CBP, there is an element traveling using this caravan as cover. Jose Villalobos Jobel, 29 years old, had no bones about his identification as MS-13. We've seen along the way, back when I started in southern Mexico, we didn't air it. We've seen a few people with tattoos that would be perhaps resemblant to gang activity, but as we certainly have documented, many of these have a criminal past. And an interesting point yesterday that we had aired, and that is the delegate, Gennaro Moreno here, is worried. He says, listen, we want people if they want to work, and we'll give them temporary jobs, but if they have a criminal past, we don't want them to be here. They've got to go back home.
All right. Griff Jenkins live in Tijuana, where it is raining. Griff, thank you very much.
Thanks, Griff.
And then you got those 4 guys sleeping under the truck. Apparently, another shelter is scheduled to open in that area tomorrow.
So we know soon the lame duck section will be over, and the Democrats will be in charge of the House, and they'll have a little bit a higher mountain to climb in the Senate. So they believe with the power of the purse that they have in the House and the ability to investigate, which they obviously will exercise, they think they have the president over a barrel. For example, Adam Schiff said, those questions that Robert Mueller handed the president to answer in writing? I think I want a live interview. I want to see the president have to sit down with Robert Mueller one-on-one. Just give you an idea of how Adam Schiff will be aggressive. Right. However, the president is not going to sit there idly by. I don't know if you figured that out.
Yeah. No, the president had an interview yesterday with the Post. It was an exclusive interview. And if you read the article, he talks about if they go after him and they start investigating and investigating and investigating, they will regret it. He says if they go down the presidential harassment track, if they want to go and harass the president and the administration, I think that would be the best thing that would happen to me. I'm a counterpuncher, and I will hit them so hard they've never been hit like that.
Yeah, what he says is he could declassify that FISA warrant early on in the investigation and other documents that the Mueller team has. Remember, it was a couple of months ago the president had said, you know what, I'm going to declassify them. And then there was some talk about whether or not he should do that, and he decided to sit on them. Now he says he could unleash these essentially on the Democrats, and he says in the crosshairs, the FBI, the Department of Justice, the Hillary Rodham Clinton campaign, all work to set him up. He was advised by Emmett Flood, his attorney, why don't we sit on these and use them at a more politically expedient point rather than right now? And so apparently the president is just waiting to spring them on everybody when he needs them.
It's going to be interesting to see, because yesterday I saw one of the interviews with a Democratic leader, and he was saying, we don't really plan on going down the impeachment road and doing that so much of an investigation, because if we don't have Nancy Pelosi in particular says, if we're not going to get 2/3 in the Senate, we believe it's too much of a risk to even pursue at this point. So let's see where that goes. I think the American people are so fed up with the prospect of investigations and nothing getting done and posturing that it could really blow up in everybody's face.
Yep. I agree. All right, let's hand it over to Jillian, who has some more headlines for us. Hey, Jillian.
That's right. Good morning. And we now know the names of the 3 U.S. Special Ops killed on the deadliest day in Afghanistan this year. Army Captain Andrew Ross, Army Sergeant First Class Eric Amond, and Air Force Staff Sergeant Dylan Elchin died after their vehicle hit a roadside bomb. 3 other American soldiers and a contractor were also hurt in the explosion in Ghazni, a city south of Kabul. 12 American heroes have died in Afghanistan this year. The Senate looking to cut U.S. military aid to Saudi Arabia for the war in Yemen. Lawmakers voting to pull financial support in light of the Trump administration's response to the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Saudi agents are accused of killing Khashoggi last month at the kingdom's consulate in Turkey. The Senate will vote again next week on taking further action against the country. In just hours, President Trump will head to Argentina for the annual G20 summit. He's expected to meet with several world leaders, including Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, according to the Kremlin, they'll discuss anti-terrorism efforts, Syria, and North Korean denuclearization. President Trump will also hold talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping over the trade war. This is going to make your morning, I promise. A deployed soldier gets a warm welcome home, and it's a greeting of a lifetime. Oh, that is Cassandra Cabrera, who was showered with kisses from her beloved Miss May at the Sacramento airport. She feared her furry friend wouldn't remember her. Cabrera was deployed with the Army in Africa. But you know what? That's why they say dogs are man's best friend, because they never forget and they always love.
That's right. Our kids could be at college for a couple of months. They come home. The dog never
So
forgets.
special.
So
Beautiful.
sweet.
All
I
right.
love those stories. Thank you.
All right, coming up on this Thursday, oil production is booming under President Trump, but guess who is taking the credit? Watch this.
That whole suddenly America's like the biggest oil producer and the biggest that was me, people. I just want you to.
Some have wondered, is President Obama, former president, rewriting his own history? We're going to talk about that.
Plus, another anti-Trump show shelved this morning. The Murphy Brown reboot set to be taken off the airwaves.
Channel 115.
I know we're an oil country, and we need American energy, and by the way, American energy production. It went up every year I was president, and that whole suddenly America's like the biggest oil producer and the biggest that was me, people. I just want you to.
Wow, there he is in Houston yesterday taking full credit for the booming energy industry after he left office. This time, oil production. Is he rewriting history, or is he just stating the fact? Let's bring in John Hofmeister, former president of Shell Oil Company, to react. John, it went up every year that he was in office. Is he wrong about that?
The facts are the facts. And yes, the production did increase throughout his term. But frankly, he had nothing to do with it. This was production in states like Texas, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Colorado, North Dakota in particular. And these were all state decisions made with industry applications for permits. The federal government had no role. And if anything, he was trying to frustrate the efforts by taking federal lands off of the availability list, putting them out, just no more drilling. He shut down the Gulf of Mexico for a period of 6 months, changed the regulations from an average of 60 to 80 pages per permit to 600 to 800 pages per permit. He also never approved the Keystone XL pipeline after dangling all the potential customers for 8 years. And it was in the 8th year when he said no Keystone pipeline. And so I would say that he was not a leader when it comes to energy, other than the Clean Air Act, or the Clean Power Plan, where he tried to remake the power generation industry without involving Congress, and the Paris Accords, again, without involving Congress. So he tried to do a lot, but it was not in the direction of the kind of energy that President Trump is working on.
Beneficiary of fracking, too, correct?
Absolutely. And fracking, of course, came online about the time that Obama became president, which, again, he had nothing to do with. And the Environmental Protection Agency did a number of studies and were able to demonstrate that fracking did not pollute local groundwater, and so we continue to frack.
So, John, do you find it maddening that the numbers show it does increase and the president's taking full credit for it because in the big picture, you feel he absolutely got in the way?
Well, he was mostly in the way when it came to any carbon-based fuel, but when it came to the actual facts of the matter, because there were areas beyond his jurisdiction, things got done. The industry and the states working together did a remarkable job, which continues to this day under Trump. And so he can take credit for all he wants, but whether people believe him or not, it depends upon, how much history do you really know versus how much history do you want to reinvent.
So John Hofmeister was not on the stage in Houston, but he spoke back here this morning in New York. John, thanks so much.
You bet.
All right, straight ahead. President Trump has answered Robert Mueller's questions, but Democrats say it's still not enough.
There really needs to be a live interview with the president because you need to be able to ask follow-up questions in real time.
Jonathan Turley coming up next.
Yep, it's time for News by the Numbers. First number, 122,000. That's the number of Odyssey minivans Honda is recalling because the sliding doors can open while people are driving. Honda says faulty latches are to blame. The car maker says owners will get a recall letter next month. Watch your mailbox. Next, 128 years. That's how long ago the Army-Navy football rivalry first began. The schools first faced off in 1890 and have played 117 times since. This year's game will be played a week from Saturday. And finally, number one. Fox News is the most watched network on cable for the 29th straight month, thanks to folks like you. Nielsen Media Research says Fox averages 1.5 million viewers every day and nearly 2.5 million during prime time. So we've got all in that big building that you're looking at right there. I'd like to say thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, we are so appreciative.
It's great. All right. In the meantime, President Trump answering those questions, apparently written questions from Robert Mueller in written form, but according to some Democrats, still not enough for them.
There really needs to be a live interview with the president because you need to be able to ask follow-up questions in real time.
Jonathan Turley is a constitutional law professor at George Washington University. He joins us now to weigh in. What do you think about that? Adam Schiff now says we need a live interview.
Well, there's no question a live interview is better for prosecutors. It's better for Congress. The question is how you get there. The only way to do that would be to force the president through a subpoena, and that would trigger a court fight. That court fight could last quite a long time. Congress is really running out of runway to take off any serious investigation that they think might lead to something like impeachment. Right. That takes time.
Yeah. When we look at what's going on now with this, with what we're seeing with all the president's men, Paul Manafort says, okay, his deal is off the table. Jerome Corsi says, I don't want a plea deal. And Roger Stone says, I know I'm about to be indicted. What do you think this means for the president?
Well, it's hard to say. I think it was a very unfortunate move for the president to be talking about pardons with Paul Manafort. That certainly plays into the narrative for his opponents. But on the other hand, he's issued these written statements denying any knowledge from Stone about any contacts with WikiLeaks or information from WikiLeaks. He's also denied knowing about the Trump Tower meeting. Now, if he's lying, then he should be impeached and removed. But if he's not, if Mueller finds there's no such evidence, then this whole narrative becomes more difficult to hold together. Sort of like not having a corpus delicti. The question is, if he's obstructing justice, the question is why? I mean, if he wasn't involved in these decisions, didn't have knowledge of them. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but we're beginning to see this begin to get boiled down to some central questions, and those are true or false. Does Mueller have evidence that the president was involved in these things? When did the Trump officials, if at any time, know about the hacking before it was released? The problem Mueller has is that if the narrative is that some Trump associates wanted the WikiLeaks information, That's not enough. It's not a crime. I mean, Clinton's people went to Russia to find dirt on Trump. That happens in politics. So he's got to have some foundation for a criminal act to make this narrative plausible.
All right. By the way, Jonathan, the president just tweeted moments ago, and it reads this. When will this illegal Joseph McCarthy-style witch hunt, one that has shattered so many innocent lives, ever end, or will it just go on forever after wasting more than $40 million? Is that possible? It is proven only one thing. There was no collusion with Russia. So ridiculous. Your observation about that?
Well, you know, I've been a critic of the president's tweets. I don't think that these are helpful. I don't think they're helpful to his camp, his position or his team. And at points, you know, this rhetoric really sort of undermines all of our desire to reach a conclusion to this. The president is right. There isn't any evidence thus far of collusion reaching him or even reaching the tops of his campaign. But this investigation is going to be completed. And quite frankly, it's in the president's interest to have it completed, have these facts come out, if what he said in these written answers are true, that there isn't any evidence that he was involved in any collusion.
Well, let's see. Maybe they're reaching the pinnacle of their investigation, and we'll all know about it soon.
Jonathan, real quick, do you think it's almost over?
I think it is. I think that Mueller is looking at the end of the year to try to wrap things up. It makes sense to issue at least one report before the year end. If he waits until Congress comes in, it looks like he's feeding material to the Democrats. So it'd be better for him to get out a report before the end of the year.
There you go. All right.
We'll see. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
You're welcome. 29 minutes after the top of the hour. This video is frightening. A bicyclist comes inches away from being hit by that train. How did he get there in the first place?
Plus, an MS-13 member caught in the caravan, apparently, and Homeland Security says the problem is only going to get worse. San Diego Border Patrol Chief Rodney Scott here with reaction. Coming up next.
It's frustrating when you can't see.
Fox News alert, border agents arrest an MS-13 gang member traveling apparently with one of the migrant caravans as the Department of Homeland Security warns this problem will only get worse.
Rodney Scott is the Chief Patrol Agent at the San Diego Sector, U.S. Border Patrol. He joins us now with the latest. Rodney, I'm watching last night and I'm seeing that the wall's been effective really since Sunday as a deterrent. But it turns out there's a whole group going around the wall. How far do they have to travel to get around that barrier?
So that's a great question. Again, thank you for having me on this morning. We're in the process here in San Diego of upgrading a legacy dilapidated scrap metal fence with a new border wall, but that project is ongoing. So currently, within a couple hundred yards of the San Ysidro port of entry going to the east, we have that old fence that's only a few feet high. Then we have about 9 miles of the new border wall completed. And then again, less than 14 miles away from the beach, we have no fencing whatsoever.
Unbelievable. It's inexcusable.
Let's talk a little bit about this member who he identified himself as, I used to be an MS-13, 29-year-old Jose Villalobos Jobel, apparently from Honduras. He was caught over in Calexico area, El Centro sector. Was he part of the caravan in Tijuana and just went out that way, or from one of the other caravans?
No, it's hard to say, to be quite honest. One of the best ways we identify the caravan members is by their own admission. We do work with the government of Mexico and a lot of NGOs to try to get more evidence behind that, but for the most part, it's based on their own statements.
Okay, we know.
My belief. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So let's talk about some of the troops that are down there, because the president says he might extend deployment for thousands of active duty troops. We were told they were going to be able to go home for Christmas, and he says if the problem still exists there, because some of these migrant workers say they're going to be there for months because they can't get asylum or can't be processed that quickly to get through to the United States. He says that he might have to keep the troops down there till January. Can you elaborate on this?
So I can't really speak to the negotiations between DOD and DHS. My job as the chief here is to outline my requirements. The situation here is actually worse than it was last Sunday. Another 1,200 migrants have showed up in Tijuana. We've also started to get into our rainy season. It's actually raining right now in San Diego, which is fairly rare, and it's starting to cool off. So we're going to monitor the situation daily, and I'll push my requirements up to Washington, D.C. and let them negotiate that.
So we know they said there's about 600 criminals within these caravans, and then we find out one of them is MS-13. What do your reconnaissance tell you about who else might be in there?
So I want to highlight the 600 criminals as well. There's a lot of law enforcement techniques on how we figure that out, but those are primarily people that have been in the United States in the past, and we've been able to get some kind of a criminal history on them. Getting criminal history on individuals in other countries is quite difficult, and also it's by admission. So we had the MS-13 member you mentioned. There's another 18th Street gang member, self-professed, claims to have murdered somebody and been in prison before, but tracking down those records is difficult.
Yeah. Chief, over the weekend, of course, that's when hundreds of migrants ran toward the U.S. border. A number of them threw projectiles and rocks at the agents, Border Patrol agents there. What's the reaction to the agents there in your sector about perhaps another encounter like that?
So we're preparing accordingly. We watched this migrant caravan, which is different than any other just by volume and the propensity for violence. We watched them violently push across 2 international borders and come up through Mexico. So we did significant intel briefings with our personnel and made sure that we were ready with the right equipment. And then we're basing off of Sunday. We've made some adjustments to our enforcement, and we're going to be ready if it comes back again.
Okay. All right.
Do you mind if I ask what adjustments? Can you talk about that you've made?
I won't get into the specifics, but in every incident like this, we do a quick after-action review. We've identified some vulnerabilities in the border that the Department of Defense is helping us mitigate currently, as I speak, actually. We've also looked at our deployment methods and the hot spots. Working with our partners in Mexico, we're trying to make sure we have Mexican police pre-deployed in some of our more vulnerable areas. You saw the Tijuana River Channel where there's really no border barrier at all. That's one of the areas that we're trying to make sure that we have a 24/7 presence.
Sure.
And then we also have 24-hour surveillance, aerial surveillance over the area now, so we can see any movement of personnel.
You're basically saying, hey, you'll do the best job you possibly can, but it would certainly help to have some type of physical barrier there to aid you in your effort, and Congress just can't get their act together. Rodney Scott, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
22 minutes now before the top of the hour, and Jillian joins us with some unbelievable video.
Yeah, this video you have to see. So let's go ahead and show you. The cyclist narrowly escapes an oncoming train. Just stop what you're doing and watch it. It's really chilling. The moment the cyclist crosses railroad tracks as a speeding train just blows on by, narrowly missing that person. Geez, with a second to spare. A rail safety agency posted the video to raise awareness of the dangers of unguarded crossings. So be careful. CBS is ending Murphy Brown after a 13-episode run. The announcement coming a week after the show embraced the anti-ICE movement.
You guys cannot barge in here like this. If you don't get out of this truck, I will spatchcock you.
The network says there were never concrete plans to continue after this season. The show did not perform as well in the ratings as other recent sitcom revivals. And a touching tribute, a stranger donating 3 Christmas trees in memory of a police officer and Marine veteran killed in the line of duty.
Last few days have been rough. They've been a roller coaster of emotion. That outpouring has been heartfelt, and it's been incredible.
South Salt Lake, Utah officer David Romrell was hit and killed by a burglary suspect speeding from the scene over the weekend. Let's look at your headlines, and good person there in that community.
A nice tribute.
Those trees.
All right, Jillian, thank you very much.
39 minutes after the top of the hour, 2 Christian artists won't make artwork for same-sex weddings because they say it goes against their faith, and they could go to jail for those beliefs. Those artists are going to join us live in the next hour.
20 minutes before the top of the hour. Plus, President Trump blasting General Motors this morning for cutting thousands of jobs. Stuart Varney sometimes walks our direction when I say his name. Other times he just stands. He says GM owes America big time. He joined us now.
Hey, Stuart. Good morning.
Good morning.
President Trump blasting GM's move to close plants and cut more than 14,000 jobs. He tweeted, General Motors is very counter to what other auto and other companies are doing. Big Steel is opening and renovating plants all over the country. Auto companies are pouring into the U.S., including BMW, which just announced a major new plant. The USA is booming.
All right, here to react to host of Varney and Company on Fox Business Network, Stuart Varney. Stuart, the president and actually Chuck Schumer are actually on the same page on this. Yeah. They're upset with what GM's decision is. Right before Christmas, hey, 15,000 people, go jump in a lake.
Well, it's, okay, that's pretty strong stuff there, Brian. It's a fight. It's a fight between General Motors, which believes it is defending its economic, financial interests and trying to stay competitive, versus President Trump, who is defending his growth program, defending manufacturing in America, and really defending his political interests as well. Mm-hmm. Frankly, I'm on the fence. That's not.
Because you love the free market?
Well, look. I respect and admire General Motors trying to stay competitive and defending its financial interests.
They've been building the wrong kind of vehicles, and now they need to build SUVs and other stuff.
Look, there's no money in building those small cars or the Chevy Volt. There's no money in it. Right. Shut it down, save $4.5 billion a year, and put that into SUVs and small trucks where it's profitable. That's the future of the company.
Now, if BMW does build the second plant in South Carolina, they already have one there where they build their X5 in Greer, South Carolina. If they put another plant there, these folks from GM, if they're interested in keeping a job in the car industry, they could go there possibly.
Well, the possible move by BMW to build a second plant, maybe in South Carolina next to the first in Greenville, doing that is a sign of success for President Trump's policy. He's saying, look, we're going to stick tariffs on you guys if you keep trying to export your stuff from Europe to over here. Right. Build it here. And BMW thinks, well, maybe we will. And that is a slap at General Motors. Well, but I'm on the fence, because I will defend President Trump's right to say, hey, look, we bailed you guys out.
And cut corporate taxes.
And we haven't got our money back, and we cut corporate taxes. You owe us. What do you think you're doing? Right. But at the same time, I defend the right of General Motors to defend its financial
Why do you think the GM CEO is not at the auto show? Is she worried about getting questions and then her stock will go down?
I think so. All right. Yes. You don't want to show up where you might get some nasty questions.
Sure. Meanwhile, stocks really went through the roof yesterday, over 600 points, all based on what the Fed head kind of said.
The head of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, he's in charge of America's money. Yesterday, he said maybe he'd go a little slower on raising the cost of borrowing money. That is music to Wall Street's ears. That makes stocks much more attractive. And we took off 600 points straight up yesterday.
The other way to make this stock surge, if they make progress when China and when President Xi and President Trump sit down at the G20.
The two big problems for the stock market in the past month or so have been, number one, the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. Right. Is he going to stick it to the economy by raising rates too fast? That was shunted to the sidelines yesterday. He's not going to do that. The other big problem, you're right, trade with China. Now, the meeting with Xi Jinping takes place on Saturday night. They're having dinner, Mr. Trump and Xi Jinping. You might, well, I'm not going to speculate, but any kind of good news that comes out of that meeting will send that stock market straight up again, because that would get the second problem out the way. But it's pure speculation to suggest that anything good will come out of it.
But we know this, if they separate, it ends badly, and they storm out early, that would send everything crashing.
That is highly unlikely that would happen.
But in the meantime, Stuart, you know, consumer sentiment is through the roof. You look at the amount of money spent on Cyber Monday, this past Monday, it's never been higher.
It was over $7 billion on Monday, up, I think, 19% from the previous.
What did better, Black Friday or Monday?
For online sales were up more on Black Friday than they were on Cyber Monday. But that's just online sales. Right. Overall, you're heading for a terrific Christmas season. Well, can I just make one last point?
Sure.
We found a gas station in Denton, Texas, where they're charging $1.69 a gallon. We've found 19 states in America where gas is $1.99 or less, where you've got at least one station selling at that price. You're not going to tell me that that is a huge shot in the arm for this holiday selling season?
Less money on gas, more money in your
pocket.
pocket.
Quite a contrast from Paris, right?
Funny you should say that.
All right, Stuart. Hey, we're going to watch Stuart from 9 till noon. All 3 hours. There's a quiz at the end, so stay tuned for the entire thing.
There is?
Yes, there is. Stewards, it's a hook to keep everyone watching.
Okay, I'll figure it out.
Straight ahead on this show, as we get to a 3-shot and gradually to a still shot. President Trump sending a new message to Democrats. Want to investigate my administration? Bring it on! Exclamation point.
And remember this iconic scene from the movie Big. Well, that toy store, FAO Schwarz, is back in business in New York City.
Good
Rob,
job.
Jilly, and Carly got an exclusive
Jilly
look.
crossing over.
They're going to take us inside that. Coming up next.
Cartoon season in full swing.
And just in time, the classic toy store, FAO Schwarz, is back in New York City.
So Rob, Jillian, and Carly went down to Rockefeller Center to give us an exclusive look. In other words, they walked across the stage
And played with
piano with their feet.
And eat a lot of gummy bears.
Yes, I actually felt nauseous
And
later
she
that
got
day.
sick from the gummy bears.
Yeah, thank you, FAO Schwarz, for
Yeah.
the free candy that you may not have known we ate.
And by the way, I know you went over there. Did you bring cameras?
You know what?
You wouldn't believe it, but we're not just going to talk about it for 2 minutes. We're going to show it to you.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Roll tape.
Did you have one of these when you were a kid?
Let me make you some food.
Oh, please do. This store has a lot of history, and it's new to Rockefeller Center, but it is not new to New York.
No, FAO Schwarz has actually been around since 1862, and we closed our doors in 2015, and we're so excited to be back here today at Rockefeller Center. We're an iconic store to New York City and beloved, and there's so many memories that people have of our history and new memories that we're waiting to, create with the kids.
How about card trick? Do I see card trick?
I would. Yeah, we're good. Stop.
Right there? We won't use that one. I can see it. Take the next one. Look at it. Show it to everybody else. Remember it. Put it right back where you got it.
Oh.
Did you pick the 3 of clubs?
What?
Wow. That's weird, right?
Is
if
that
I
the
close
card
these up.
Plastic beach here.
Oh, it's made. Oh my gosh. What are you doing here? Rob, Jillian, you shop here? It's always funny when you run into your friends at the grocery store.
Carly's having the time of her life.
I'm a big 80s movie lover, and I love Tom Hanks.
Yes.
And I remember Big.
Of course.
And I remember that piano. Let's learn.
Let's do it. Let's go. How does the song go again? It goes, I'll show you. Is this the dun dun dun? 2? Yeah. Together, and then there's 3 and 2. Okay. There you go.
Ever since I saw Big in the 1980s, I've wanted to play on that piano, and I finally did it all these years later.
Finally, unsuccessfully. But a childhood dream come true.
right.
I think we did a pretty good job. I think you did too. All right.
Well, you made beautiful music.
We had so much fun.
Did we?
Did you have fun? I
was
had
fun.
fun.
It was a good
so
time.
the old
Yeah.
store, I want to hear what the new store looks like. I've heard it's really long lines right now, so maybe until after Christmas.
Crazy long.
But when you walked in the old store, there were stuffed animals and then the candy. And upstairs was the piano and all the toys.
Yeah.
What's it like now?
Pretty much
Similar.
like that.
It's just tight. Like, I mean, it just feels small. It's like, I think they need a little bit more space, but it's...
We're just glad it's back open, because
pretty
remember
cool.
when it closed, everyone across the country was so sad because we love this iconic movie.
And then we lost Toys R Us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now this is a place to go because there are no more Toys R Us. I think that they're probably
This
gonna be
spun
places
off.
to
They were
Costco.
all owned by the same business, and then they spun this off into its own thing.
It's not just a store. It's a special
It's an
event.
experience,
Yeah.
really. And if you're going to go right now, as you mentioned, the long lines, go early.
Well, it's a movie that's
Like
been
right
that
now.
we've all watched. A movie that we've all watched that's been based in New York. Like you can't ever close down the Plaza because of Home Alone. You can't ever close down FAO Schwarz because of Big, and you can't close down Macy's because of Miracle on 34th Street. So
That's true. Now we have that
Our
many
thanks to Kim
staples.
Walker, the producer that put this together. It was the first time she put together a story, and she did a very good job.
Yes, exactly.
Good job. Kim.
Very good.
Good job, Kim.
All right, we have more Fox and Friends coming up.
Slowly zoom out.